In the past at least year since the pandemic began, and more people have been on their phones watching news or videos of public unrest. There have been there are now more eyes than ever on the systems that have been politically and economically oppressing those with less power. This oppression that comes from different parties with different power is often met with a party that is being ostracized or otherwise deeply affected with violent protesting, peaceful protesting, and the method in which the oppressed respond to the mass amounts of oppression can and alter can and does alter the outcome and effectiveness of the revolution or the attempt to go against the opposing oppressing forces. Violence is not a justified response to political oppression on both legal and moral grounds, and that's the value premise I'll be talking about today. Um, Basically, the ends can't justify the means if the means have tainted the entirety of the situation. We can judge the concept of the value, that is, the phrase violence is unnecessary, by the lack of physical harm at protesting events, as well as if the protesters and the protested come to an agreement. Violence in response to political oppression, again, is not legally justified, although some may argue that it's morally justified. I'm here to prove today that it is neither. It is neither legally justified nor morally justified. Oxford Languages defines violence as behavior involving physical force intended to hurt, damage, or kill someone or something, whereas political oppression means the persecution of an individual or group within society for political reasons. And those two go hand in hand, unfortunately, when it comes to oppressive powers, when it comes to instability economically, um, differences in classes. So my first claim today is that violence in response to political oppression adds more unnecessary death to the side of the oppressed. Um, when there's such turmoil with citizens and their government, it is best to solve these issues with little or preferably no bloodshed. That's ideal. An article written by Lois Beckett from The Guardian says that at least 25 civilians, at least, were killed in 2020 with links to political unrest. Many of these murders remain unsolved, as according to Dr. Bennett. Today, my second claim will be that peaceful protesting is more effective than violent protesting, which is a common uh, discourse. It's a common conversation that people like to have. Um, uh, let's see when, and actually for this one, uh, what some seem to misinterpret when protesting is what is the best way of winning the battle being fought. As some believe violence, sorry, as some believe violence is the best way to be heard, others realize that numbers and large crowds of people united and coming together for one cause is the most effective way to make your statement and make a change. Um, from globalcitizen.org, we see that many protests that were carried out peacefully were successful. Big names such as the Suffrage Parade for women's suffrage, the Salt March in 1930, uh, as well as the famous Montgomery bus boycott by Rosa Parks. These are all peaceful protests that made a big change and have a long-lasting effect. So also when the numbers of protests begin to rise, there's something you have to take into consideration, and that's how many lives we can save while responding to the unrest. Um, it's best to make the large amount. It's best. It's the best time when the protests begin to rise to make the large amount of people as effective as possible. Therefore, you would want to peacefully protest and use that form of messaging to make a change rather than get violent. Therefore, peaceful protest is better. And in time of such turmoil in the United States, we must recognize that fighting fire with fire only ends in more death and destruction. Something that I look to, and I've seen in the past, since I've been to several protests. I make sure to keep my inspiration alive each time I go. So I want to reference a video from September 27th, 1966. On the television show 60 Minutes, Martin Luther King Jr. was a guest on there to speak about the injustice in his movement and the movement he backs and puts his life into. He famously stated that a riot is the language of the unheard. That went very widespread. It was heard very widespread, and it was taken out of context. Because majority of the rest of the interview, he was talking of the concept that nonviolence is the most potent weapon available to the person of color in his or her struggle for freedom and justice. And that's something that I take to heart, and I hope that others take to heart as well, because if you fight fire with fire, you will get burned. And another old adage is an eye for an eye makes the whole world blind. And we want as many eyes open as we possibly can in the near future, to everything to come. Thank you today for listening to me, and have a good day.